I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Charlene. Welcome to Empowered, Life Lessons of Everyday Women.
Each episode, you're going to meet an amazing woman who has struggled through challenges both in her home life and work life and has become very successful. Meet Rhonda, the importance of having goals. Rhonda has spent many years as a registered nurse. Her career has spanned delivering babies in Chicago's South Side, CEO of Carson's Children's Medical Center, working overseas in Africa, Saudi Arabia, and Dubai. She is currently consulting to build children's hospitals around the world. So grab a cup of coffee, get in a comfy chair, and let's talk to Rhonda. Welcome, Rhonda. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So you've had a wide variety of experiences, but before we go in and tackle some of those questions, we would like to start by asking you, based on your experience, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Make sure that you have goals and that you also give back to your profession or to your community or both.
Just starting right off, so a question for you. Why did you decide to go into nursing? How did you get into that field?
Long story, but I'll shorten it. My great-grandmother had 19 children.
Ooh,
and
wow.
None of the children were cared for in any kind of a facility. Always at home, both births at home as well as if one of them had polio. And as they aged, we all learned how to take care of each other. So that was one way. The second is that my grandmother, one of those 19, was the superintendent of a TB sanitarium. And when I was in even junior high, I would go down and work with her and really be interested in the wonderful care that was given and the loving care that was given. So then I became a candy striper to see if I really liked it or not, and I loved it.
Wow.
That's really an interesting path that led you there.
It is. So I have to ask you, being in a TB or tuberculosis sanitarium, which a lot of the young listeners probably won't understand that people were isolated when they had TB a long time ago. What were some of the things, the challenges or the issues that you saw while you visited that really impacted maybe how you approach things?
Well, first of all, nutrition. Grandma was really high on nutrition, and it was important for all of these patients to have good nutrition. So one of the things she taught me was everything about nutrition you could ever want, including how to plate things before they went out to the residents. But that was really part of the learning. But the other part was the loving care that I watched others give to those individuals, because isolationism in a situation like that was a possibility, and they didn't feel isolated. They felt cared for.
Was there concern about it being spread at that point in time, or were people not as nervous about that?
Semi-nervous about it. It wasn't that early in the situation so that they were real afraid, but it also wasn't later in the situation where there could be just no fear at all in the middle of it.
Interesting. So was it all of those relatives that you had, that many young babies? Is that why you decided to really get into the children's health aspect of it?
No, actually, the children's health aspect of it came when I was in my nursing program, but I did a lot of other things before that. One of the first things that I did was deliver babies in the projects of South Chicago. The gangs would be outside the building that we lived in, walk us to wherever the baby was going to be born. And of course, they're not born right away. So the gangs would rotate, and they were protecting us because we were helping their people. I also worked orthopedics, oncology, all different kinds of things, and then started a cardiac care unit in one of the hospitals I worked in. But I loved children all the time, so it was really fun to be able to get into the pediatric aspect of it in the later years of my career.
So how did you become involved with the nursing, the care, delivering babies? You must have just been out of your program.
I was 6 months out.
Geez. So how did you get involved with working with those people and being protected by the gangs?
Part of our rotation experience in my senior year was exposure to that. The South Side of Chicago and all the issues, not just OB, but all the issues in the inner city of health, illness, drugs, etc. And when I found out about the Chicago Maternity Center, it really was intriguing. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be safe or not until we really learned that the gangs were very, very protective of us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that takes a lot of gumption. I'm sorry, but I'm just
a little speechless over here myself. Because, it's hard enough, and I was going to say this, it's hard enough to be a nurse. I think nurses are one of the most unappreciated people in the health industry, my personal opinion, because they're the ones that you really see when you're in the hospital or you're having a situation. They're the ones that you're interacting with constantly. It's a special person anyhow. And then to go into the projects and be exposed to kind of this crazy world that you were delivering babies in, that's
unexpected. I mean, you don't know what you're facing as you're going in there, and that challenge in and of itself.
It was fascinating. We delivered triplets on a kitchen table, and they were actually all good shape, so we didn't have to send them to a hospital. The babies needed to go to a NICU.
Did they have prenatal care beforehand?
Most of them did not, but at the center where I stayed, they could come there, but many of them didn't come there.
Mm-hmm.
What was who was the biggest influence in your life, and why?
That's a little hard, but I will say 3 people. One was my mother, because my father was killed in the war when I was just 2 months old.
Oh.
And to be as sturdy and strong as she was, but she came back from Idaho, where I was born, to this large family. And so that was the second group that was very influential, because everybody took care of each other and supported each other. And then my grandmother, the one I spoke about with the TB sanitarium, she was an absolute inspiration. The girls couldn't go to school, and yet here she was, superintendent of a TB sanitarium and of a long-term care facility later in her time in healthcare, never with any high school. And at 88, she called me, come over, and she shows me this piece of paper that was her GED at 88. And so inspirations of goals, like I said earlier, are really a key. And then third, I would say my stepfather, which I never called him that. I was 4 when my mom and he married, and she would always say that he married her because of me, but he never treated me like I wasn't his. And they had 4 others together, so there are 5 of us as siblings, but he was just phenomenal and taught me so much. He was a businessman. He's an engineer for the telephone company, so I learned how to run his businesses, which were Dog and Suds, etc., and really had a lot of learnings from him, and he never treated me any different than any of the other kids.
That's really wonderful.
So you have had a very versatile life, because one of the things that we know about you, which is something that's actually in common with me a little bit, but you worked overseas. Could you tell us a little bit about maybe the challenges? I know that was later in your career, but can you tell us a little bit more about the challenges of working overseas, especially since you worked in some really interesting countries?
Sure. I will just say I'm also doing it still now for a company called Global Healthcare Accreditation. We accredit medical travel programs all over the world, so I do that still. But these were particular jobs. The first one was working with AIDS victims out in the bush of Africa and really trying to cut down the AIDS epidemic that was there at the time. The learnings were absolutely fabulous in terms of how people survive when they don't have the same things that we just rely on all the time. And the wonderful thing was the children. And I also was able to come back to Hartford Healthcare, where I worked during that time as well. and really share with our physicians that they needed to not be, but they were always judging, I guess it's the word I would use, the Black community that would bring children into our clinics, and it was Grandma that brought them. Well, I learned when I was in Africa and was able to teach our staff and our docs that in the corral, which is the reservation, the homestead for the groups were run by Grandma.
Oh.
And Grandma chose the girl for her grandson. If she didn't have a baby within 2 years, then Grandma would kick that gal out and wouldn't give him a marriage certificate. After the baby was born, if she did have a baby, they got a marriage certificate, but the baby lived with Grandma in Grandma's hut for 2 years till they could graduate to the children's hut. And so that's why Grandma brought them into our clinic in Hartford, because that's the way they were raised. The other opportunity that I had was working in Saudi Arabia and setting up at King Faisal Hospital their quality program. Fascinating part of all of that was they had probably more technology than anybody could ever want. They also had mothballed hospitals because that person wasn't king anymore. And so there was this technology just sitting that we would have just loved to have in the U.S. But the thing that was really a challenge there was every day, as you know, there's prayer time. And 5 different times of the day. Well, you don't know until early morning, 4 o'clock is when they announced it. And so we have to change our schedules because everything stops during prayer time.
Oh, wow.
Every room has a prayer rug in it where everybody prays if they can get out of bed.
Rhonda, I was just going to share with you that I also lived in a Muslim country for 3 years. So I'm totally aware of how that kind of gets into life. It's just part of the culture. I mean, it's
stability that you have to have in order to do that, where we're not used to it. You know, that gets into understanding the culture and everything else and adjusting what you need to do based on the culture you're working with.
Even going through Ramadan was it's a whole different cultural experience for those of us that live in the United States and are fortunate to live in the United States. We have different things that we deal with, but it was definitely cultural and definitely made things interesting, I would say.
And challenging.
Yes, very.
Okay, so do you have children? Were you a mom? And if you were a mom, how did you balance your home and your career life? Because it sounds like you were one busy lady.
We have 2 children. They're 7 years apart. And my motto with all of my staff when I was in leadership positions was, your children will never be that age again. There will always be this career for you. So make sure that you're not taking away from the learnings, the opportunities, the teachings with your children. So as a nurse, you can do just about anything. So I would teach during some of that time when the children were small. In one of the situations with our son, who's the oldest, there was a school right there, a preschool. So right there on the campus, we had one. He'd come to work with me. I'd go over to lunch with him, and then we'd go home at the end of the day. So I really believe that you adjust accordingly. My husband and I always rotated when we were going to school, so only one of us was in school at the same time, meaning for our bachelor's, master's, et cetera. And we always had family council, so the children were able to help make decisions.
Oh, I love that.
That's great.
I did that with my kids when I decided to move out to Arizona because I knew it was a big move for them, and they were, they'd already moved once. And I remember sitting them down, and it's like, okay, you guys decided this, so you can't come back on me if you decide that you didn't like where we moved.
And we did not do that when we moved. We ended up moving our family to Malaysia, and we did not do that. We just sort of told the kids, but they were really young. One was 4 and the other was 7. So I don't know that we could have had a family council with them and they would have understood. So we just said, hey, we're moving, and this is when we're leaving. And so we got it in their heads so they could adjust to the idea.
Mine were too. We always did that no matter what. Our decisions were just to get them started with it. Even when my husband and I were going to school, we would study together. So when they had a little bit of homework in first grade, I was studying for my master's degree, and we would study together, which bonded us and helped them understand. But I have to tell you a fun story. When our son was 16, we were out here and we had the conversation just like you all talked about. And he and I kind of got into it one day. And I said, Chris, sit down. You've never been 16 before, and I've never been the mother of a 16-year-old before. So let's figure this out together, because he was our oldest.
I love that. I love that. My dad used to say that. He'd go to the doctor, and the doctor would say, have you ever been 82 before? He said, no. Well, okay, then you're just going to have to figure it out. So many of our listeners are asking about mentors, how to find a mentor, what to look for in a mentor, how to get the most out of that type of relationship. Did you ever have a mentor?
Yes, I had 3. And let me tell you a little bit about how I progressed in my career. Every 2 to 5 years, I would go to an outplacement firm. Not because I wanted a new job, but because I wanted some self-reflection. And I would interview a counselor or the counselors and choose a counselor that I knew was going to be tough on me. And then take one of their tests like they give you when you're thinking about a different job. And then we'd have a discussion. And we'd know whether or not it was time for me to move, what things I needed to do differently, etc. I would take that information back to my mentor, one of the 3, and they were different during the different times of my career. But it really helped to do the self-reflection and growth plans and goals, like I had said earlier, really setting those goals and networking. Mm-hmm. I didn't stay just in the nursing space, but it was important to know CEOs, CFOs, CHROs, etc. So I joined American College of Healthcare Executives, which was that diverse group of individuals, not just nurses. Was president of AONL, which was the nursing specific group, nurse leaders. President of American Nurses Credentialing Center, which got me into a lot of different things in D.C. with ANA and with senators and representatives, so that I was able to really decide but learn what I needed to learn if I wanted to do something different. And I wrote an article once for ACHE because sometimes people just go for titles. The article was to find out what you really like, not what title you want. And they had to write 2 columns. One was, what's in the column of activities that make you jump out of bed and say, I got to get to do this? And the other was, what's in the column that you pull the covers over your head and say, I never want to get out of bed to do this? So that, and I did that every time I had that counseling before I went to the counseling, because your ideas change. And I also wanted to really do some self-reflection.
So it's interesting that you're saying that. I assume that you wrote these things down. So, and not everybody is. I've done goal setting in my life, and, obviously it works better when you just write it down. But
absolutely,
it sounds like you were way ahead of your time in that. I think that's just something that's super important, because when it's in writing, you can reflect on it.
Absolutely. And I always journaled. What at the end of every day, especially when I was in my leadership roles, what really went well that day, what didn't. And right now I'm mentoring quite a few people, but one of them is our minister. I'm the chair of the elders of our church, and he's very young and learning how to be a leader. And we have him doing his reflections and his journal so that we can talk about it then.
So interesting. One of the questions we wanted to ask you was, did you ever manage people older than you? But it sounds like you're definitely managing people younger than you. But I would assume in your career that was just something that just happened.
Well, yes. When you work in a unit someplace, there are a lot of older nurses. And as a new young nurse, having come into a particular organization early in my career, different from the maternity center. There were a lot of old nurses, and I was a new to practice nurse out of school a couple of years, but I was the charge nurse.
Oh, wow.
Not an easy job, especially when we never do things this way.
Well, and I'm sure that some of them were probably upset because they didn't get that position and they wanted it.
Absolutely. And that doesn't help either.
So how did you navigate that friction that would have occurred from someone else having wanted your job?
I would have meetings with the group. We would have a team meeting on a regular basis and ask, what could we do differently? What do you want me to do? What do you see me doing that you really like? And really get good feedback from them. And in the beginning, it wasn't easy for them because they weren't very open. But when they realized that I was really wanting that, looking at my practice as a leader and how I could help them, but also change, they became very involved with it and gave good feedback. And
so you build trust with them. You had to build the trust with them to get them to eventually open up with you?
Absolutely. But the whole goal, and this is what I would keep coming back to all the time, we have 36 patients in those beds. We're all here wanting to do the same thing for them.
So there's a couple things tidbits here that I'm getting. The idea of inclusion, which really helped foster a positive situation in a situation that could have been, even though it took a little time to get there. That's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So sometimes and this would be in corporate hospitals, whatever, there's politics that go on within those entities. How did you work at identifying some of the corporate politics that was there, and how did you manage it in order for it to help you get things done?
I'll go back to that last comment that I made. I always, once I identified something and I would do my assessments, I always brought it back to what does it mean if we don't do something? What does it mean to our patients?
Okay.
What does it mean to our families? And what does it mean to the person who is practicing at the bedside, whether that's a nurse, a physical therapist, a doctor, whomever? And started a movement, if you will, called the Triad, which was the chief medical officer, the chief nursing officer, and an administrative person, and had those at every unit as well as for the whole department and then at the system level. And that made a huge difference because everybody felt like they had input as opposed to silos, decisions being made, and it influenced or affected the practice of others. And so we really used the Triad method throughout every one of the higher level leadership positions that I had throughout my career.
So another question for you. It sounds like you were really able to bring people together, but every once in a while, I'm sure there was somebody that was a coworker or somebody that was just toxic. How did you kind of deal with a person in your work life that might have brought a toxic atmosphere to the job? What were the steps that you took to kind of either resolve that or, frankly, maybe get rid of that?
So a couple of things. First of all, always had goals with every person and expected that my leaders, my managers would have goals so that if there was something that was on that brink of being toxic, how they worked toward a goal to improve, whether that person needed additional coaching, education, whatever it might be. When it was between and among a couple different areas or different people, and it was toxic to the whole group because the two couldn't get along. And I send them away, the two parties, with 3 questions to answer. First is, what do you do that gets in my way of me doing my job? The second is, what do I think I do that gets in your way of doing your job? And then the third is, what are we going to do together to make this work? And when we come together, we start with the self-reflection. What do I think I do that gets in your way? And see how it matches what they wrote down for the first one. They have to go away. They have to write all their answers out. And then I bring them together and facilitate the discussion.
Okay.
And we end up with a plan. And actually just did that a week and a half ago with a couple people.
I really like that approach, and that can be used in so many different situations.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Even in personal situations.
I'm thinking, kids together.
Can I just families sometimes are the worst. We love them, but sometimes families are the most toxic areas of our life. And this is a really good strategy to kind of let everybody have their voice be heard, but also, again, that the idea of it sounds like you used a lot of inclusion.
Absolutely.
And I think that's always good. People want to be heard.
Absolutely.
We've talked about that before.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So Rhonda, you talked about going back to school when your kids were young. So did you already have your bachelor's degree when your kids were born and then go back for your master's, or?
No, I was a diploma nurse. Years ago, as old as I am, they had diploma schools. There's just a few of those left, which are you receive your degree as a diploma nurse from going to a school that is hospital-based.
Okay.
And then you're still able to take your boards, et cetera. And obviously you have to pass your boards to be an RN. So I was a diploma nurse at Evanston, Northwestern. Some of our courses were at Northwestern. And we did get college credits for that. And they counted toward a bachelor's later. But when I finished my nursing program and took my NCLEX, which is the test that you have to take to get your RN, I was a diploma nurse and didn't have my bachelor's or master's, just had some credits toward my bachelor's.
So then you went back for your master's program.
Bachelor's and master's. Yeah. And I then was given an honorary doctorate from Grand Canyon because when I came here to work at Banner University, they had a diploma program. And it was the time during the 60s that they were closing out all diploma programs. So I got Samaritan to fund the Samaritan College of Nursing and close down the diploma program at Good Sam when I came as the chief nursing officer. And so Grand Canyon gave me an honorary doctorate.
That's great.
That is great. That is great. So I know I went back and got my master's when my kids were still in school. And I was a single parent doing that, and I know how challenging that was, just juggling everything. Were you working full time and getting your master's, or did you just do that separately?
I was teaching, actually, LPNs.
So you had 3 jobs: going to school,
children, and teaching.
and raising your children. More power to you, Rhonda. I mean, talk about being empowered.
Yeah. So, Rhonda, this has been great. And I'm going to ask you a few more questions, if that's okay. So if you had to, tell us what has been your biggest life lesson that you'd like to share with our listeners?
As one becomes identified as a chief operating officer, a chief nursing officer, CEO, and I've been in all those positions, don't forget who you are. And what I mean by that is, again, I wrote an article because there are a lot of nurses who drop their RN after their name when they get into a CEO position or a chief operating officer position. And I actually interviewed a group of people that were in that situation and said, why? Well, it's not required, quote unquote. Well, guess what? Nursing has been voted the most trusted profession for the last 23 years. Wouldn't you think if you were a CEO and you were an RN that you would put that behind your name? Not only because you need to be proud of it, but also what would your patients think since it's the most trusted profession.
Right.
Second thing I said in the article is there any doctor that's in any of those positions and that doesn't put MD behind their name?
Exactly.
That's great.
I like that. But it also, I mean, it gives you credibility in the sense of, you're now in a leadership role, but you've got the background, and it shows that you have the background to support that position.
And it also shows that you weren't always a CEO, that you were something before you were CEO.
Exactly.
And I think just recognizing that and having pride in that is really important. And sharing that with other people, just to say, this is where I came from and this is what I am now. But, you're not forgetting where I started and what made me who I am. So that's great. So any other last words of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners before we say goodbye to you?
Yes. One last thing. There's probably a lot, but one. Don't forget the people that work with you when you become that top leader. What I would do when I was in the CEO role would ask every one of my managers to send me on Fridays accomplishments of some of their staff. So somebody got married, somebody got a degree, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote handwritten notes to every one of them.
Oh, that's huge.
And sent them out. So that was one piece of it. But the other piece is then when I rounded, because I was always out and about, I could say, oh, Charlene, I know that you just got your degree. Congratulations. So you're building relationships as opposed to, why is she out here? Did we do something wrong?
Mm-hmm. You're giving them that boost that somebody actually knows who I am and is interested in me as a person.
Absolutely.
That's huge.
It is huge. And I think that it's something that's not being done anymore, but power of a handwritten note or a gesture or a conversation is incredibly powerful, and it doesn't go away just because we're in the social media world. That is just a priceless lesson, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Well, and I think, when I've gotten handwritten notes from different people, whether it's a birthday card or, what have you, just a thank you card maybe, some of them are so touching, you keep them and you refer back to them. You don't necessarily do that with a text, and that's really powerful for me.
I think it's more powerful than flowers or gifts or anything. It's just the power of written word.
Absolutely.
So that's
and I also all the people that I mentor in nursing and outside of nursing, I really remind them of that because it is such a key for them to be considered a strong leader who cares.
I like that.
That's beautiful.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Rhonda. And we really appreciate you sharing all this words of wisdom with our listeners. And I'm sure they'll find it very, very helpful.
So thank you for thinking of me.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
To our listeners, if you found this podcast helpful or have any questions, please let us know. You can send us an email at empoweredlifelessons@gmail.com, or you can visit our website at www.empoweredlifelessons.com, or you can find us on Facebook and other popular social media. And if you wish to share your life lessons with us, please contact us at our email, and we will put you up for consideration, because we are always looking for great insight, life lessons, and we really appreciate hearing from our listeners. In our next episode, meet Linda. With over 30 years in the mortgage industry, Linda brings great insight on managing people in a transitional environment. Her career started processing mortgages and finished as the VP and regional manager of over 250 people across 5 different states.